welcome to Beyond the Paradigm. My guest today is William Ramsey of the William Ramsey Investigates podcast. William is also a published author and he's wrote numerous books, including Children of the Beast, The Smiley Face Killers, and the book that we're going to be talking about today, Global Death Cult, The Order of Nine Angles. If you enjoyed this episode, can I first of all ask you to give it a like? And secondly, if you enjoy content like this, please subscribe to the channel. Well, William, it's a pleasure to have you onto the show for the first time. So welcome to Beyond the Paradigm.
Oh, great to be with you. Thanks for the invite. Glad to be here.
No, it's like I said to you before, you was recommended to me, and I am familiar with your podcast. I know you've got a lot of episodes, like you were just telling me, you've got like about 1,200 episodes, and I mean, you must be really busy doing that because I know how difficult it is just doing a podcast as well as having other things going on. But just for possibly some of my audience who don't know who you are, could you tell us a little bit about your background and then what led you to write sort of the books you've written and obviously to host your own podcast?
Yeah, I was kind of conventionally educated. I have a law degree. I have a BA in history, and I was working as a lawyer, and then I kind of got burnt out with that and really started writing books. I was always a researcher, researching things. So I've kind of published my first book in 2010, and I published 5 books in that time and 5 documentaries. And it was during that time that I was a guest on all of these other shows. So I was compiling my kind of guest appearances and putting them on YouTube, kind of tinkering around. I mean, it's strange to have kind of a hobby that way, but that's kind of what it worked out as these book writings is kind of my hobby. And then it turned into me interviewing people, and then I was heavily censored right as Biden came in, the Biden regime came to power in the United States. And so I started a podcast. So I got all my uh audio stuff out of where it was on YouTube. And then I found out that my podcast was in the top 1.5 in the world. So I was like, oh, I was making decent money and staying busy and doing what I enjoyed. So I just kind of pursued that. And then here I am today, kind of 1,200 episodes of different me being a guest and a host. So it's kind of like a hybrid plus still have books. I put my second edition, well, my update of my newest book, Smiley Face Killers. I just published it last week or 2 weeks ago. So I added on another 50 pages because there's so much going on with that. But yeah, that's kind of like it in a, encapsulated my kind of career.
I can feel you on the censorship. I've just had a video removed and a warning myself off YouTube. I put an interview I did with Kathy O'Brien on there. My audio has been out for quite a while, and I just thought I'd try it. It's on Rumble, no problem, but YouTube, I think it lasted probably half an hour, and that was it. It was gone. So I've had a warning. So there's a like yourself. I mean, I've got the audio going on, and I do have a channel on YouTube and Rumble and BitChute, but there's stuff I've got. I just can't put it on YouTube, unfortunately. That's it's the world that we live in now. Now, obviously, you're over there in the United States, and it's made the news worldwide, this situation with Donald Trump. And I'd just like to get your thoughts on that because obviously we know that the mainstream narrative's not going to be true, but there's so much speculation, was it staged? Was it, an inside job? There's all kinds of ideas floating around, but what's your thoughts on, what you've seen so far?
Well, it's
What do you
obviously not
reckon?
staged. It's obviously not
No.
staged because somebody died there. Somebody got shot in
Hmm.
the head and they pulled his body out. He was bleeding. So not staged. That's just the psyop that's surrounding it. So it's kind of interesting that that fake statement is there so fast. Like, oh, it's staged, it's fake. So it's a part of information warfare and makes you ask, kind of beg the question or ask the question, why is that there? So Trump became was within a quarter inch of his life of being dead, and it would have been a world shattering event. And it's hard to believe that even his campaign would allow all that situation to occur without that, where there was a definite security breach. I've talked to a guy today who's a Blackwater contractor flat out said, like, there's some should have been somebody on that roof. It's not that hard to figure out.
Mhm.
And then it also should elicit the question, why was that the case? Why was nobody on the roof where the shooter was? And why did they wait to take the shot until he shot? And so they explain it to utmost negligence. I'm very suspicious as to why that happens. There's a lot of interested people here in the States who would like to see Trump killed, and they've said nothing less, eliminated. Or Joe Biden, 5 days before the shooting 2 days ago, said Donald Trump is in our sights, which is a very telling snipe reference.
Mm.
So the environment to shoot Trump is definitely there. And it's very, I mean, there's still kind of information coming out. The shooter is very suspicious, very little social media presence. I guess he was on OnlyFans spending money, but there's nothing to show that he was a real ideologue who wrote everything about negative about Trump or negative about him. So like there's no record of it. There's a video of him, if that's the right guy, even the right guy. So we're still getting information. There's a lot to be determined, but it's a very serious event and was really, I think that even the results of the not killing him will have incredible reverberations. So it was very incredible. I mean, that was really the front runner. He's an ex-president, but in all the polls, they want him to be president again. So
Mm.
it's an incredible timing. The timing is incredible.
Yeah, I feel like you guys are in for a bit of a rough ride over there. There's going to be so much going on over the next few months, and like you mentioned there, I mean, I'm ex-military myself, served in Afghanistan, and that's one of the things I thought straight away. Why did they not have a shooter themselves on that roof where the shooter was? And I've seen a few things today where it shows him crawling into position, and there's witnesses shouting to the police, "There's a man on the roof," and you can actually see him crawling in. And my first thought was, well, not the fact that he's got on the roof. How has he got there with this rifle? So is the rifle already on the roof? Has it been put there for him? Has he been up a few days before and stashed it? These are all the things that are going through my mind. But like I said, I mean, it's a massive event, and you know, we don't know obviously the repercussions, what the sort of ripple effect's going to be from that. And I suppose we'll just have to wait and see now. But moving on from that, obviously, I've brought you on really to talk about one of your books, Global Death Cult, The Order of Nine Angles, Autumn Waffam, and The Slaughter of the Innocents. Now, admittedly, I had never heard of the Order of the Nine Angles until I seen the title of your book. So, what is the Order of Nine Angles?
It's a British occult group, a cult order that kind of coalesced in 1970s and 1980s out of the far right. So I think it was National Alliance is the name of the group. And one of the members' name was David Myatt, and he kind of created a organization that would fuse kind of far right ideology, Nazism, neo-Nazism, with the occult. And so the group that came out of it was called the Order of Nine Angles. It started with very small pamphlets, 3-page letters sent to PO boxes and things like that. So this is pre-internet, and it slowly grew. The corpus and the writings, slowly grew over time. There were books that were formulated. One of the main books is called Naos, or the other one is The Sinister Tradition. And it differentiated itself from other kind of occult orders like the OTO, Freemasonry, Temple of Set, Temple of Satan, or Church of Satan, in that they had kind of a more brutal, vicious kind of outlook of very similar to Nazism, but they're Untermenschen, and you kind of ascend up their septenary way or sevenfold way through human sacrifice. So you go out and select what they call an offer, and you don't get caught. So you're not supposed to kind of get caught, but you're supposed to secretly kind of murder them. And it tied into my research with the smiley face killer. So it's a very dark organization. It's metastasized with the advent of travel and the internet. So this group is now kind of, they have little cells, which they call Nexians, which internally they believe them to be kind of a mix of kind of spiritual, or what they would call causal and acausal. So almost like spiritual and temporal or physical. And they're all all over the world. So these Nexions actually have been very active in Russia. They have had groups there doing these evil deeds, and you're basically trying to accelerate the breakdown of society so that really people like the Order of Nine Angles, or what they would call internally maybe Homo Galacticus, could come to power and create kind of this new neo-Nazi state, nothing less. And there's a they call them Homo horribilis, and they're kind of like the kind of concept of, or mundanes, of the concept of Untermenschen is in the German, where they're just not equal to you and you can treat them as whatever you want. So that's kind of like the Order of Nine Angles in a nutshell, but it's really kind of changed. It's has now over 10,000 pages, believe it or not, in 2024, of its kind of internal literature. And more people are involved in it than we know. It's all very secretive. There's no membership list or anything really overt or obvious like that, but its ideas really do suffuse the world and have kind of suffused the culture. Like there's bands in the UK you might know of. Ed Sheeran's Bad Habits video and song is really based on O9A ideology. And there's another band called Bring Me the Horizon that has similar themes of the O9A. So it's not something that's, and there's been a lot of deaths. When I wrote Global Death Cult, there had been deaths here in the States associated with Atomwaffen, which is a kind of our version of our neo-Nazi group. And since I wrote the book in 2021, the person who I was the head of Atomwaffen, his name was Russell. He actually got arrested by the federal police here in the United States for plotting to blow up the electrical grid of the city of Baltimore in Maryland. And the purpose was because Baltimore, Maryland is 60% African American. So it is an active group. There are things that are people who are associated, who commit crimes, who are arrested. And it's a real world kind of thing that grew up kind of out of, like I said, like these small journals and through the internet. Really, I think it's really disseminated through the world by the internet.
So the founder, is he still active? Is he still alive, or?
He's still alive. He's in his 80s, I believe, and he operates under different names. But apparently, he's on Twitter or X. But
Is
he's supposedly, it's not a lot of very secretive.
So
Pardon?
is he from England, the founder, did you say?
Yeah, absolutely. His name
Yeah,
is David Myatt. He's actually lives in Shropshire, which is a
yeah.
very kind of rural part of on the border of Wales, between England and
Hmm.
Wales,
Well, I was in
and very
Shropshire
kind of
today.
rural. Oh, wow, small
I
world.
do,
Maybe you were
yeah,
there for awesome.
yeah, I'm from England, but I live in Wales and I do travel quite a lot back with my job. So I was actually, yeah, I was over the border into Shropshire today, actually. So he's from there.
Yeah,
Interesting.
yeah. That's where
So,
the original kind of mailings of the original ONA documents came out of there. Came out of like a PO box in one of these kind of your version of a kind of a post office in England, in the UK.
wow. So what are the nine angles?
Well, they have a symbol with these kind of nine angles, and it represents the planets, the seven planets, and kind of this portal to the other world. So when you draw a line between them, it becomes the order of nine angles.
Okay. And what sort of global influence does this organization have, this cult? Like who else have they infiltrated? Are you infiltrating police, military?
Well, that's a really good question. I mean, basically, they do have a global reach. Like I said, they have these Nexions all over Canada, Italy, all over these countries. I list a lot of them in my book, but there are some in Finland, Iceland, Australia. There's many in the United States, but they have had people committing crimes based upon their ideology. I think that's the most important thing. So the global reach, and the main of the reason of the title is because of the global reach and what they're up to. But they've had crimes in the States. There was a guy in Canada who was arrested and jailed. His name was Willem Willem von Nudegem, and he went out and stabbed some random person, like a random criminal. And he had a complete kind of well manicured or well maintained ONA ritual temple in his apartment. and he would do the chants, and he had all their implements that are really specific to the O9A, excuse me. There was another one, Daniel Hussein, who was in from North London, and he had literature associated with the O9A and had these ideas, and he had made some blood pact in his blood to a demon called Lucifuge or something like that. Percival Lucifuge, I forgot the name. But he went out and late at night and killed two sisters who were celebrating a birthday party just because, to fulfill his blood pact. They call him the jackpot killer because this kind of demonic pact that he made was in return, he wanted to win the lottery. So there's questions about his sanity, and he's actually being charged right now. He was actually convicted last year, but they didn't charge him with the crime because they didn't know if he was sane or not. They had to go back through and do another kind of analysis of whether how culpable of his actions he was because of his ideologies and ideas. But he had been influenced by people who wrote stuff for the O9A. So it does have real world effects all over the world, places all over the world. And it's really kind of a new phenomenon. It's a new global phenomenon because of the level of communication between people and travel, really. So a lot of these far rightists, they came to the UK and people go back and forth. Some people go fight for the Azov battalion in eastern Ukraine. They were involved in that before the war really broke out, February 2022. So a lot of strange kind of events of these far right kind of Nazis. And this is kind of a subset of the Nazis. So it's like an occult Nazi is what you would call these guys.
Yeah, I mean, in England, like where I'm from, there is a history of this far right movement. I mean, when I was at university, I actually did a dissertation on the rise of the far right in Western Europe since 1980. I mean, we had a number of groups, and there's still active groups now. I mean, like National Front, British National Party, English Defence League, Combat 18. Obviously, there was a more sort of really extreme who was involved in sort of nail bombings and stuff.
And there's a connection between the famous nail bomber in London and Myatt. He was part of the National Socialist Movement, is what they called it. I forgot the bomber's name, but
Copeland. I know his last name was
Copeland. Yeah,
Copeland.
Copeland. That's right, Copeland. Yeah. So there were thoughts that he may have even known Myatt, which is he's kind of an unrepentant mass killer. Like those nails, injured hundreds of people. So, but Combat 18 was known as also was a right-wing group, but it was also a Gladio group, right? So it was a stay behind kind of network, and Myatt was part of that as well. So he's part of these very dark far right groups that the same people are around, the names are different. They change, but a lot of times these same people, if they get caught or something goes bad, they rebrand themselves like as a new group name. And there are allegations like concerns whether how much of an intel asset Myatt really is. Is this group, the Order of Nine Angles, a cover for intel activities and recruitment? And I think it's a valid question because here in the States, Atomwaffen, definitely they caught somebody who's associated with a O9A here in Annexion, like I told you, like the Temple of Blood. His name was Suter. And it came out in a court case a couple years ago that he had been paid over $100,000 to basically be an informant. So what other kind of informants are there out there in the far right world? I don't know.
I was going to ask you that actually about the involvement of the intelligence agencies, because with things like this, I always suspect their involvement. I mean, are we talking CIA or are we talking multiple agencies, do you think?
It's a good question, and there's not a lot of answers. At least I don't have those answers, but it's just the allegation. Like Combat 18 is definitely the Gladio networks were all supported by Intel, right? They were all meant to be anti-communist in case something went wrong. So those were all kind of Intel supported. And how many members of those were recruited or whatever, I don't know. So there hasn't been a lot of obvious. A lot of the people who commit the crimes here in the States in the far right are young men. So it's not like they're groomed. They may be groomed by Intel people, but they there's no evidence of that. Like there's no, they're not, if they are, they're not talking.
So what's the main thrust of their ideology? Like, do they have some kind, I know they don't have like an official manifesto, but do they have something like documentation where you can sort of, identify like the main thrust of what they believe and the aims, their actual aims, what they're up to, what they plan to do?
They believe in aeonic change. So Hitler himself talked about 1,000-year Reich, right? So it's an aeon. It's not like I want to survive for a century or something like that. The Order of Nine Angles has the same kind of idea. Aeonic change, long-term change. They want cultural change. They want political change. And then if you look at through their corpus of their texts that they've acquired, written over the last 40 years, you just see the same kind of things. The definition, the mundanes, they have a concept called the insight roles, where you join other organization and learn from them. So a lot of these guys will join the military, National Guard, something like that, so they can learn how to use weapons. They are above the law. They believe that the law doesn't apply to them. They believe in dark gods, so they believe in kind of a spiritual universe and that you can be possessed by these dark gods. So they have this occult kind of view. They have a oral tradition. They're definitely anti-Christian. Like they're definitely what they would call anti-Nazarene. So that includes kind of Jews as well. So there you can kind of get a trace of their ideology just by reading kind of their manuscripts. But I think leading back to everything and something that Myatt wrote, and I think is still true, is their idea to human sacrifice, their belief in murder, and so I think this is a quote from Myatt. If there's one thing which expresses the essence of the satanic ethos, it is the culling. If there's one way to detect pseudo-Satanists, it is their attitude to culling. So he uses that to differentiate between what an authentic Satanist is and what is an inauthentic Satanist.
What, how do they select the victims? Is it just purely random, or do they have sort of markers that they look for, or is
That's a good question. They have this process where you're supposed to kind of pick out the appropriate victim, and they're usually because of some kind of unfitness or weakness, whether it might be drinking or something, but something that selects them. And so a lot of times they write these self-selected. So I have this section, chapter 4, in the concepts of the Order of Nine Angles. They have kind of a written down thing of what they really believe. Like the select in, it's like there's a lengthy in one tract, a lengthy description of the culling process provides advice on what type of sacrificial victim or offer should be selected. Satanic sacrifice makes a contribution to improving the human stock, removing the worthless, the weak, the diseased in terms of character. Naturally, this culling occurs on a somewhat larger scale by using magical means to direct or influence or control events. However, the correct choice of offer that with their elimination, the sinister dialectic will be aided, and thus the intrusion of the acausal into the causal sped up. So they're talking about like you're supposed to bring in these dark agencies by murder. So, for example, they use it. A young man of weak character, no self-discipline, a lout of the worst kind, spends his time stealing cars and committing petty crimes. He lives on Social Security benefit and has a disdain for nearly everyone. He is often drunk. On one occasion, he steals a car. That's like their ideal op for somebody like that. So getting rid of that person improves the social stock.
and is there a particular method that they use to kill people, who can it be just like anything, stabbing, shooting, whatever, or is there something preferred?
They're supposed to not get caught, so they're supposed to secretly kill them, whatever way it is. And that's really
Right.
another kind of mystery about the ONA because they have an oral tradition, ORAL. So I think that there are some things if you kind of go up through the ranks, you might hear more information than what they have in writing. So I don't make a claim to know exactly what their oral tradition is, but I can tell you what's in their writing, and it's pretty scary.
Hmm. So it's all to do with sacrifice, isn't it? So do they believe then that they're releasing like some kind of energy and like dark forces into the world by doing this?
Absolutely. I think absolutely. They have 21 dark gods, and they're all kind of like there's correlations between them and the stars, and there's portals, and you're supposed to bring down these dark gods and presence them, which is kind of like a possession. So it's very strange. They have some very, to me, very unique uh cult-like outlooks like that are I didn't see in any other the kind of occults or cults that I've studied. But yeah, it gets pretty dark. Like they believe in presencing, they believe in vampirism, psychic energy vampirism. So that can include like blood drinking and things like that. So it's kind of like it's not, it's like any other occult group, really. It's like a mismatch or a mixing of other kind of ideologies into one ideology. He didn't like Crowley and he didn't like the Kabbalah. So Maya kind of made it, he turned it, the Order of Nine Angles into kind of a real proto, not Aryan, but I would call proto-British ideas or druidic ideas, really.
Mm.
And the real kind of core septenary way is based on the tree of word or the tree of fate, WYRD. So it's kind of a strange kind of paganistic worldview that they have. There's no question about it. But it inculcates all these other ideologies in there, like faking, like shrenching, where nobody knows what you do, like you have an external outside job, but they don't know that you're a hardcore occultist and you don't tell them. So that's like there's a lot of deception, a lot of strange stuff on there.
Yeah, I wonder, like, there's a march being organised on the 27th of July in London, and I mean, it's basically a far right march, but a lot of these people are sort of going down there, probably haven't got a clue what people they're mixing with, and they're just, going down as sort of patriots type thing in sort of
Right.
response to these pro-Palestinian marches. But I mean, you do see different sort of symbols. So like you said, there's a lot of deception, and who knows who could be mixed in them sort of circles. But
That's very true. They've had infiltrate. So the Order of 9A has this insight rule thing where you infiltrate the far right, but you're a member of the ONA. That's your primary loyalty, not to this far right group, even though you influence it and influence it to do malevolent deeds or stuff like that. So it's not very clear when so an O9A member, if they adhere to the ideology and they join something, it doesn't mean that they're really taking on their ideology. They're learning from them and trying to, excuse me, guide the group, so to speak.
Mm, yeah, because it's again, I mean, it's causing division, isn't it? It's just another sort of way of causing division between
Chaos,
you.
acceleration, exactly. And it's interesting you say that because one of the odder thing, a very odd, strange group, it's hard to understand their concepts, but one of the things people didn't understand is why the founder Myatt became a very radical Muslim, right? So he
Mm,
joined like the most radical sect of Islam. Why would somebody from the far right who's associated with the far right go to Muslim? Because they do the same thing. They blow stuff up. They're radical. They, destroy things. So that was his attraction for it. So within these groups, you sometimes see these guys as an insight role is radical Wahhabi Islam. And
mm.
Maya was definitely like that.
So obviously you've mentioned Atomwaffen in your book. So who exactly are they, and what's their origin?
Their origins from the States. So I think his name was Clint Russell, was actually from Florida and Tampa, and started an online group. He had come from and associated with a group called Iron March. That was an online group. I think the founder was like the message board or internet site was from Bulgaria, but he was kind of associated with that. And then he started Atomwaffen. Its symbol is like the radioactive symbol. But they were a far right group that had some traction here in the States. And they were involved. There were people associated with Atomwaffen where people died. Like there was this Giampa kid who killed his girlfriend's parents. There was another guy, I think his name was Woodward, who killed a young man named Blaze Bernstein in California. And then there was associates of Russell who both got killed. They were both AK-47 in his house, and their names were Onish, Chuck, and Himmelman. So there was like associated murders with these guys, and then they became very. The federal government keyed into them, and they were a lot of them got arrested very recently with long jail sentences. So I don't Adam Waffen they say has dropped off and isn't as much of an effective far right group as it used to be, because a lot of the guys went to jail. And I think that's the case. I think that's true. But they were good for some very dark stuff, and they became associated with even earlier Nazis here in the States, of which there were some. There was a guy by the name of Norman Lincoln Rockwell who was shot in Northern Virginia, and one of his associates was named Mason, who wrote a book. Really, it was a grouping of different letters, kind of like how the ONA got compiled, was a grouping of smaller letters. But he got a book called Siege, and so all of these Atomwaffen members read Siege and the ideas in Siege, which is really kind of a race tract, like, we're the white race, the power's in the blood, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, so Atomwaffen kind of has a kind of new legacy. They were involved in a lot of swatting campaigns. They engaged in the largest swatting campaign in US history, which means like you call the cops and say that an address of crime is taking place, with the intent that the cops kind of show up with guns and break in. They actually swatted the head of the Department of Homeland Security here in the United States. So they were very ambitious. And one of the interesting turns that they took is taking interest in Charles Manson. They liked Charles Manson's ideas. He had this Atwa idea, which is almost kind of neo-paganism, where it's kind of like Gaia worship or worship of the earth. And they took a liking to him, and Mason and Manson became friends. It's like a very strange connection. And there's pictures of Atomwaffen. They went out to Manson believed that there was a crack in the desert that led to the underworld, and he told his followers about that. And now there's a picture of the Atomwaffen guys at that same hole into the other world, which is really strange. So Atomwaffen's taken weird permutations. There's a lot of deaths that we know of. We don't, some of the other ones we don't know of, but they actually spawned kind of off shoots all over the world, and they were kind of popping up. So in the UK, they had this group called Sonnenkrieg, they had Führerkrieg, and they're prescribed. Like, I think they're prescribed in Australia, which means that if you join that group, you get a automatic 10-year jail sentence. So and it's kind of morphed. Actually, they've morphed out. O9A has morphed and Atomwaffen into kind of newer groups. So newer groups with newer titles. And there's a very strong, in these newer groups, a very strong strain of what they, basically child predation or child abuse. And they CSAM material is kind of a new word for child sex abuse materials. And these groups are kind of 764 and other names. There's other weird names, but they are online predators who find and blackmail young kids and get them to either hurt themselves or engage in horrible stuff. And there's a lot of sexual abuse of kids under the age of 16. So these are very young kids. And these are recent cases. And I did a show on the 764. And there's other cases like Angel Almeida here in New York City. And there's been cases, I think, in the UK of these kind of people, like very twisted desire to like abuse kids, I think boys and girls, and promote and disseminate this, what they call CSAM, kiddie porn, child sex abuse material.
Yeah, I read a little bit about the Order of Nine Angles and a little bit about Atomwaffen before obviously speaking to you. And then basically this website I was reading summed it up that basically they're an organization for pedophiles who worship Satan, practice black magic, and embrace extreme right-wing neo-Nazi ideologies. Would that sum it up?
I think that's the more recent one. I think there is a correlation between child abuse, but I think at the original, I think that because they're above the law, that happens. But my sense is that the real kind of pedophilia, child abuse is a more recent aspect of them, because it's not in their writings. It's not in their original writings. Like their original writings are all about Satanism and comparing themselves with like the Church of Set. So I think that that's a lens of looking at the ONA through a modern kind of expression of the ideology, which is correct, but it doesn't go back into the original documents. It's really not there, this whole thing. So it's some kind of new thing I think that grew up with the availability of porn and the internet and video cameras and all this stuff. But there's some really harrowing, horrible documentaries and videos about these girls and stuff who get abused, and they mark themselves, so they like brand themselves sometimes. And that was their job. There was one kid in Texas who got busted. I think he got a really long sentence. I can't remember his name offhand. All he did all day was abuse kids online. Like that was like his reason for existence. He would spend 8 and 10 hours, cajoling kids. They would show up on like message boards in a very non, and this is a danger to, I mean, a warning to all parents. They would show up on very benign areas. Oh, hi, Joe, Jane, my name is Tom. And one of those guys from Canada was actually an adult, like he wasn't a kid. He was like in his 30s. But like, hey, okay, blah, blah, blah. Oh, I really like you, blah. Do you want to come over to this site? So then they would lead him to a site. It's almost like grooming, what they call it in the States. They would groom the kids, and then it get darker and darker, and the control would get really dark. And then these very dark actors would share the stuff with each other. So it was like a competition. Like how can you find the biggest victim and stuff like that. So really horrible stuff. And it's very, I don't, the interesting thing is like when I published the book 3 years ago, some of the stuff didn't exist. Like 764, this new kind of offshoot of the O9A, did not exist. And a lot of the Russian stuff that's been happening recently didn't exist. But like I say, it's like a mind virus that, because the ideology is available on the internet, people all over the world pick it up.
It is, that's really dark stuff. I mean, I would just encourage people, protect your kids at all costs online, do whatever's necessary to protect them. Because, like Williams just said, how they lead them away from these regular sites. And then it's just, I mean, it's terrifying, really. And
What's
it's so,
interesting, what's interesting, Paul, too, is it's not just the victims. A lot of the perpetrators are online often. So a lot of the guys who became heads are spending time online. So it's even a danger for the perps. Like your kid could be a victim, but also become a perp. Like, what's your kid doing online? Like, one of the parents of one of the guys who murdered the two people said, I lost my son to the internet. Like he lost him to the internet, and then he was young, vulnerable, suggestive, thought that the far right stuff was cool, gave him an identity, gave him what he thought was power because he was powerless in the real world. Most of these guys who are the perps have no external life. They don't do drama, they don't do sports, they don't like go out with their friends or play basketball. It's very strange. So it is the internet that for me is the real kind of cause of a lot of this kind of newer O9A stuff.
so what would you say are some sort of gateway organizations? Is there a particular one, say Atom Waffle, or is it mainly like you say they're getting into this through sort of internet? Is
I
that the
think it's
main way?
internet. I think it's like benign and make contacts. They're younger, so they make contacts with older people, and then the older people encourage them on to like you know, doing dastardly evil stuffs. But I think it's mainly online. Like I think that they probably are on right thinking, right? So they think kind of like a thing, and then they reach in and somebody else takes them even darker. Have you read this? Have you seen this? And then it
Mm.
gets really dark. And a lot of them really are damaged. They're really damaged. They're from like broken homes. They have mental health problems. They might be on the spectrum of autism. So I think that might make them more susceptible to that the like really sick, perverse, dark ideology of the ONA and its offshoots.
We had I used to work in a prison. I was a prison officer, and I worked in a high security prison. And we noticed a particular group had developed in there. Obviously, we had Muslim extremist groups, but we also had this far right group developed called the Piranhas. And we had to sort of put intel reports in whenever we've got any information. But that was a similar type of thing. You know, people who had damaged goods got involved with this. Probably like the Muslim extreme gangs as well. You tended to find loners drawn into it. You know, if you had a lone white guy who'd come onto the wing, it'd be like who gets to them first, whether it's a Muslim group or these piranhas. But when we became aware of who was who, obviously we had to then start separating people. But so I would imagine that some of these things also start off in prisons. Same over in US.
Yeah, I think so. I think that there's definitely far right prison groups here. There's no question about it. But
Mm.
yeah, it's kind of it's not obvious. Like I think that at least in the US prison system, my understanding is that it's very broken down by race. Like you hang out with your race and that's it. So within those groups, how much of this ideology is there is unknown to me. I didn't see a lot of like ex-cons or ex people involved in the ONA. I saw young men who, were online a lot, suggestible. So that's kind of like that was what I saw. But I don't know what goes on in these prison groups. It is interesting because a lot of these guys can be exposed because of their symbology and symbolism. So like they'll be with the sinister tradition. You'll see a picture of the Order of Nine Angles, symbol with the nine angles in a circle. And that's kind of what gives it away. Like, okay, this person knows this kind of real extreme esotericism.
You mentioned like symbology to do with Ed Sheeran, his video Bad Habits. Could you sort of talk us through that? How
Yeah,
that's linked?
absolutely. Absolutely. So Sheeran's Bad Habits is a very listened to song. An interesting guy, smiley face tattoo, a lot of drowning symbolism, which is very weird. But he wrote this book, this move, Bad Habits video, or was in a Bad Habits video and song, and the song has like 500 million downloads on YouTube alone. So it was number one globally, if I remember, in certain countries. But the song itself really goes through this. Um, it goes through the culture of the ONA. If you symbolically watch it, it begins with him at sundown. He's a vampire. He's with his own kind of group, like the ONA group. He stalks among the mundanes. He hangs up sound downside like a vampire bat, right? Suggesting a vampire. And the lyrics of the song itself are kind of a giveaway. Like I have my bad habits lead to you. He talks about like I'm going to do it once and do it again. So like all of these like lyrical things are referencing O9A ideology. There's absolutely no doubt about it. And it's just when you watch that video, it's really incredible. And he's friends with these guys who have kind of similar O9A. They're not big in the United States. It's the Bring Me the Horizon, which may be an O9A reference because the horizon is what pops up at the end of the night, right? So it suggests that they're up all night and the horizon is what brings them up. But I'm trying to find the lyrics here. They're really, really something else. If people know the Order of Nine Angles and then read it, it's in my book, uh, Global Death Cult, but it's just like, uh, this won't be the last one. Probably won't. This might be the last one. Probably won't. So he's like a serial killer. Yeah, the lyrics are really something else.
You mentioned sort of drowning to do with this video as well.
Well, his other
What do you mean?
video, there's another video of Ed Sheeran's that involves drowning, which I can't remember the one. It's
Because
you have to. Yeah, sorry. I'm trying to find the lyrics to it. It's somewhere in the book. Let me see if I can find it. Sheeran.
because the drowning thing, you obviously talk about how these sort of water deaths of college age men. Could you tell us a
Yeah.
little bit about that? Because one of the ones that I was interested in is I don't know what your thoughts are on Matthew Perry, obviously the ex-Friends actor, and he drowned, didn't he, in a hot tub, which was suspicious. I mean, what's your
Right.
thoughts
Right.
on that?
Well, originally they thought it was an accidental death. That was October 2023. Like Matthew Perry's huge here in the States. He was in one of the most popular TV shows of all time, Friends, and was a drug user. He had kind of a pharmaceutical drug problem, but he was found drowned and they just assumed it was an accident. Well, it turns out that the police are investigating it like a murder because he had a lethal dose of ketamine. And they called it a dose that you would use for surgery. So, like, nobody's gonna like to use that much ketamine for recreational drug use. So did somebody give him a huge dose of drugs and then drown him in his pool? Is the question. One of the odd things about that Matthew Perry death is that on his X or Twitter handle, he had a smiley face, right? And this whole smiley face killings is a very strange set of deaths that's happening. And it's got its name because people would be found in water dead and there'd be a smiley face next to them. So it became known as the smiley face killings. It's really just the phenomenon of young men disappearing or disappearing late at night, later to be found in water. So nobody sees them go into water. They don't say, I'm going into the water. They don't, tell people. And it's always at night, just like Matthew Perry's death was at night. So I did a show called Is Matthew Perry the most high profile SFK or smiley face killing victim ever? And it might be. He really might be. So there's a lot of like suspicious deaths happening right now that are associated with water in Austin, Texas, and Chicago, Illinois, among other places. And so that's one of the reasons why I got interested in looking into the O9A. Is there like some association, some ideological association? And I can't find any, but it seems like there's some kind of ideological correlation, is the way I would put it.
We had a spate of killings over here that in Manchester in the northwest of England where there were young men turning up drowned in the canal. And this, well, of the person who's done it's never been caught and still at large, but they've given him a nickname and they call him the pusher because they believe that he's pushing people in the canal. But some of them, like there's been sort of documentaries done and interviewed the parents of some of these young men who's died, and like one of them in particular, his parents were sort of saying, well, we can't understand if he's been pushed in because he can swim. Do you know what I mean? It's not like he couldn't
Right.
swim. So whether he's been held under the water, whether that's sort of, someone who's motivated by these smiley face killers, I don't know. But it's always in water, always in this canal. They always turn up drowned in this canal.
Yeah, I was in a documentary about the Manchester Pusher. You can see it on Amazon because it's the same MO, same phenomenon worldwide.
Mm,
It gets different names all over the place. In Austin, they call him the Rainy Street Ripper because the main kind of party street is Rainy Street.
mm,
But there's a lot of very like you can read my book or watch my documentary because I have a lot of cases from Manchester. A lot of
right.
suspicious cases, people coming out of bars later to be found in water. And it ties in. I mean, some of those I looked into the so-called 65 cases in Manchester, and some of those really were seemingly accidental. They happened late at night. It was
Mm,
very, very cold. But then the guys last seen coming out of a bar. So there's a disappearance between coming out of a bar and ending up in water, and nobody sees them. Those are classic smiley face killings because in another drowning, people would be like, "Oh, I saw him go into the water, at 3 o'clock, or we went swimming together. He didn't come out." So where are these people in these interim times? Oh yeah,
mm.
that's an interesting one. But Ed Sheeran, I can't seem to find the song, but you can look and find Bad Habits. It's really something else.
Yeah, I'll have a look at that.
Yeah,
Because obviously, I mean, symbology within sort of Hollywood and the music industry and everything's really big, isn't it?
yeah, yeah.
You see sort of different entertainers who were small time, then the next news, the stratospheric, they've got global, you know, uh, fan base, and then you watch the videos and you realize why, because the videos have got sort of satanic imagery and things like that.
Yeah, and Ed Sheeran has a very strange yellow smiley face on tattoo, and you can see that, and it's the same kind of yellow smiley face that Matthew Perry was holding on to. I think the Bad Habits, since I last looked at it, the Bad Habits music video is up to 617 million. So I misspoke. It's way
Wow.
past 500. Yeah, it's something like that. I'm trying to find the other song that he was in that he has like smiley faces. So it's just kind of pattern recognition and things like that. But yeah, he something else.
Well, it's a fascinating topic, dark topic, but people are interested in this type of stuff. I mean, I know that that the Pusher, you said you've done documentary on that. I know people who'd be definitely interested, and I'll be recommending it to them. Because obviously that's a thing. People used to talk about it, like, who is this guy? And because there was sort of people saying that his modus operandi was the fact that he would be killing gay men. That was one of the things. It's not known to be a fact, but they suspected that possibly that might have been a sort of target group of his. Can't be sort of verified completely because we don't know each one of his victims or whatever. We don't know who his victims are. Like you said, some could have been accidental.
Yeah, the Manchester Pusher. Yeah, check that out. Let me see if I can find it. It's on Amazon. I don't know what it is.
Definitely have a look at that.
There's actually a book that's come out in the interim. Oh, it's on Curiosity. It's called The Manchester Pusher. I'm in that. The guy author is Gary Jay.
Okay.
So you can check that out.
Well, definitely going to take a look at that, William. It's been really fascinating talking to you. Like I said, I mean, I didn't know really anything about the Order of Nine Angles. So when I was looking through your books, obviously you've got a number of books. That was one that sort of I thought, well, I need to speak to you about this. I had listened to a podcast where you talked about it, but I'm certain that probably quite a few of my listeners might not have heard of it also. So, I mean, this is, like yourself, it's getting the information out there about these things. We live in a dark world, and that's part of the reason for this podcast is sort of exposing the darkness. Um, and that's all we can sort of do, really. Just keep getting the information out there. So just before we sort of bring this to a close, could you tell people about a little bit about other work you're doing right now and just mention some of your other books and where they can get them?
Sure. Like I just updated my Smiley Face Killers book. It's the most recent information, 2024, July. You can find that. There's an audio book, a Kindle, and a paperback. You can just find that at Amazon or my website. It's a lot harder for me to send it all the way to the UK. It's another $25 or something like that. But you can order signed copies. And then Global Death Cult, I wrote it in 2021. I need to re-update it. It's hard to believe because so much has happened in the last 3 years. But it's a good primer on the ONA because I went through a lot of that literature and read a lot of that stuff. So it'll give you people like a head start or a speed up to see what the far right. If you're not in the far right, you can kind of see that these guys are operating transnationally, and their ideas are operating transnationally. And I also did a book on Children of the Beast, Aleister Crowley's influence over humanity. I did a criminal case here in the U.S. on the West Memphis Three. I published that in 2012, and then I wrote another one about Aleister Crowley in 2010. And you can see my 5 documentaries on my Patreon. You can just go to my Patreon and pay $5 and just watch them at your leisure. And then, like, I have my kind of an investigative journalist podcast. It's in the top 0.5% in the world. So it's the top 30,000 podcasts in the world. And it's on a variety of different subjects. It's not all true crime, but I do a lot of books and current events. Like I just did 2 shows today about the Trump attempted assassination. So I try to keep up on things, keep people informed, and try to give something that's kind of evergreen. So you can some of these old shows are still current. Important topics like George Orwell or William Blake or something like that. A lot of UK figures, English speaking world or something like that. So that's pretty much it.
Well, thanks for your time tonight, William. If you just stay on for 1 minute before we shut this down. But guys, I would recommend William's podcast. He's got a lot of episodes on there. So there's a big back catalogue. Like he said, multiple topics. I'm sure there'll be something there for everybody to listen to. And that's what I like. I like variety on here as well. And it seems, you know, that people obviously like variety. Like William said, it's a popular podcast and it's well worth a listen to. And I'd recommend you get his books as well. So thanks for your time today, William. It's been eye-opening. Like I said, I didn't know really anything about the Order of the Nine Angles or Atom Waffen. So, you know, it's a pleasure to talk to you. You've done a lot of research. I'll be back next week, guys, with a new guest. I'm Paul, and this is Beyond the Paradigm.